Hi all, I am back after a very long time. In this video, I am going to discuss what is CDN, how CDN helps in reducing page load times, and how it eventually helps in scalability and all. So let's get started with this. So first of all, let's discuss what is CDN. So you can understand a CDN is as an cache, which basically provides the end users your content, your static and your dynamic content. We will discuss how it works, but firstly you will have to understand that CDN is nothing but a cache. I'm an owner of xyz.com, right? Whenever a user hits xyz.com, I have to provide them with my HTML, CSS, JavaScript and all of these files, and eventually the user hits my server and gets these things, and eventually these things are loaded in their browser. Now, how CDN helps? CDN helps is that, let's suppose my end user is in Europe and my backend servers are in India, right? Whenever the user hits the URL, the user request has to come to India, right? And to be served from my backend servers from India to the Europe computers, right? So there would be a latency, right? Latency, you can understand latency is by the amount of time in which the request sent from the user's end and gets back the response. So that is the latency, two-way latency, you can say. Okay, so let's suppose if a user in Europe hits my backend URL which is in India and gets a latency of 5 minutes, sorry, 5 seconds. It's not 5 minutes, 5 seconds. Okay. Now, how CDN helps is that most of the CDN providers, whether it's Akamai, whether it's Amazon CloudFront, whether it's Cloudflare, and most of the companies are providing these CDN technologies. How this CDN helps is that these companies promise that, okay, we have our computers, we have our data centers and all of these servers basically in all the geographical location of the world. Okay, so let's suppose my end user is in Europe, right? And I have to serve my data to this user, and my backend servers are in India, obviously. What I can do is that I can say to Cloudflare that, okay, can you please give me a server or basically a cache computer in which a user can call you, okay, and you will provide my content. Okay, how this works I'll tell you. So basically, let's suppose I taken 5 servers in the geographical location, one at Europe, one at Dubai, one at UAE or something like that. I had distributed this so that my end users will get equally distributed to these servers. So let's suppose a Euro server is now calling xyz.com. Now what happens is that there is domain name resolution, and this domain name resolution will not redirect that user to my website, but to redirect that user to the Cloudflare CDN server. Okay, and that CDN server will provide my data. How? Now let's suppose a Europe user calls the Cloudflare CDN server. Now this CDN servers find that, is the data which is asked by the user is in my server or not, is in my cache or not. If this is not in my cache, I would call the India servers or my computer servers, the origin servers, and calls and takes the data from there, right? So what this CDN server will do is that this CDN server will call my systems, will fetch the data and stores that data into their cache, right? So that for the first time it gets called to me. That's fine, that has to be done. Otherwise there would be no data at the CDN end, right? So so at the first time the user have to come to me, right, for the data. But after that, every time a user calls the same request, right, it would get cached, right, at the CDN end, and it would get the data which is cached, right? So let's suppose tons of users are calling the same URL xyz.com, and every time these users are calling my service, in the first case when I don't have CDN, in the second case, how this CDN helped me is that only the first user who is calling xyz.com is calling to the origin servers, the my servers which is in India. The second time these requests are cached, these responses are cached, and for these requests I am sending the cached responses. and you can easily able to identify that what is the difference between a cached system and the calling a basically a server, a backend server. So let's suppose previously my latency was 5 seconds, right? Now this time my latency is 5 ms. Why? Because I am sending the content from the CDN cache, which is really fast, and also the latency is very low because I am sending this data by the nearest CDN, which is the CDN, which is the server located at the Europe region only. Okay, so first thing, the latency is low, and the second thing, the responses are fast because it's cached, right? And caches are fast than the backend servers. So these are two benefits. And similarly, this is for the Europe person case. This case is valid to each and every people all over the world. So let's suppose someone is calling from UAE and something, the cached responses will be given to that UAE user, and similarly to all people around the world, right? So this is how the CDN works. And let's suppose if a user is calling for some basic or some particular URL, let's suppose xyz.com slash anything slash orders slash anything, right? And that responses is not in the cache, it will call the origin server, it will fetch the data, it will save the data into the cache, and the next user will get the cache content, will get the faster responses as compared to the previous responses, previous latent responses, you can say, right? So this is how the overall architecture of CDNs, right? So in most of the cases, we will going to use these famous CDNs: Akamai, Cloudflare, CloudFront, Amazon, Azure CDNs, and whatnot, right? Because these are the major players in the market, and we can easily trust them for our data to be sent to the particular to the users all around the world, right? That's why will give some them will give them some amount of money, and we'll get the CDN caches from there, and we'll use these CDN caches to deliver the content all over the world, right? That's how the most of the systems, Facebook, Amazon, and most of the systems all around the world are working from these CDNs, and they are really scaling well. Why? Because previously, let's suppose if my backend servers, it's taking 5 seconds, which is really a huge amount for delivering responses. Now my servers, with CDNs, it's just delivering the responses in 5 ms, right? Which is really fast, and I can scale my systems now because I really have the bandwidth to serve. Previously, I have the bandwidth of, let's suppose, 10,000 users a day, users at a particular time, let's say. Now I have a capacity to serve 10 million users, right? With all of these CDNs all around the world, right? So that's how the scalable systems work, and with the CDNs, that's how the systems work. So I think that's I'd covered most of the things in this video. If you have any concerns or any doubts, you can comment me down. I'll be really happy to answer you. Thank you so much. Bye bye.